Hello, everyone out there in video land, my music masterclass cyberspace. This is my second attempt at a video, and I tried something a little bit different, reaching out to some fellow guitarists about some specific questions they had, so I wouldn't just be talking in a complete non-contextual vacuum about things related to playing the guitar and playing music, which is pretty general to say. I should specify that really, like, most of the questions and most of what I'm dealing with has to do with improvising and playing so-called jazz music, which means many different things to different people. But I always feel uncomfortable teaching a style or teaching any kind of specific vocabulary. I think the whole thing is that you teach yourself to speak. And it's the same way you teach yourself how to play the guitar. You have to acquire vocabulary so that you can have a spontaneous conversation with people. And it's great to have a conversation with people musically that are outside of your realm of familiarity in terms of, you know, just improvising with people and finding some common form, but they might have a different stylistic bent or a completely different way of approaching their instrument and approaching music. And that's always good. Improvisation is the thing that makes life interesting in general. Just, you know, not when the day doesn't go exactly according to plan. That's when, you know, most of our memories and interesting things in life happen. So to me, improvisation is really about, and practicing, studying improvisation is really about how you might prepare for these encounters that you have no way to really prepare for and no way to really predict what will happen, outside of maybe a song list, or, you know, obviously if you play with people over and over again, you have some sense of what it is, which only raises the stakes of the need for us as improvisers to really try something different and reach another place. Not to say that just in speaking you're inventing new words as you go along, but you're trying to form ideas and find new ways and new nuances into what you're talking about. So when I say everyone pretty much teaches themselves to speak, I think it's the same with music. It's like you have to acquire vocabulary, you steal sayings from other people, and then you find a way to hopefully integrate that into somewhat of a personality, a musical personality, I think. You know, you can't really prepare for these things, and you shouldn't try to necessarily work out everything you're going to play. I think the fun of it is what you find when you go off the beaten path and go outside of what you know and what can predict. So how do you prepare for this? To me, I've been thinking about this, and I see a lot of people in jazz education going towards the information, going towards amassing information, which is very important. Of course, you need vocabulary, you need ways of speaking and a mastery of language to express yourself. However, I think you can also practice things that help you reach, that help you compose on the spot. So the whole balance when you're improvising is how not to make it sound like nothing is connected. At the same time, how do you make it not sound like everything is pre-planned and worked out? So you have to be on that balance, the edge of where you're giving information that is that makes sense, and just like language is understandable. And at the same time, you want to reach for new things. You're trying poetic ways of saying the things that you have to say. So information by itself is not interesting. It's just the textbook. And the idea of poetry, without any mastery of how to put words together and how to convey a meaning, is also kind of meaningless. Poetic. Just, you know, you have to balance the poetic with the information. And that's the thing I'm fascinated with, how to get better at doing that, how to get better at practicing that. So part of it for me is just like approaching music from the sensory place. We know we have to use our brain to figure out what's the root, what's the fifth, and all these numbers are involved in music. But I think we go past this, we go past the ear element right into the brain part very often, because we have this sense that jazz, there's so much information, there's so much to know, so much I have to know before I can think about how I express myself, which I think is a mistake. I think you're always trying to learn how to express yourself with what you have. So to me, it's about how do I practice the development of an idea? What makes me play something after another? Is it just what the chord is telling me, and therefore my knowledge of a scale that goes with this chord? If that is my only thing telling me what to play next, I run the risk of just playing another scale. So how do I connect my ideas? So I'm looking at, just like every student at every level, I'm looking at, like, how do I avoid the pitfalls of what I'm trying to do? It's a big thing about the brain and how that processes music, and then the ear, which is a sense, right? It's a sensory thing. We have to have ways of making associations with sounds that are sensory or sensual. This chord sounds this way, and that's a feeling, and we start to just know this sound, and it becomes familiar to us. But it doesn't start out that way. We have to make these sounds familiar. One sound that's very familiar to guitar players is the sharp 9, the 7 with the sharp 9, especially from the E. We learned that, right? Now, I was experimenting with this sound from D flat because there's a lot of open strings you can get. You get the same voicing with the 2 open strings, and you have an extra string. You have that. You have the sharp 9 with the open G giving you the flat 5. Now I put the D flat and the F, root, and the 3rd down here, and I'm opening up another open string, which gives me D natural, which is the flatted 9th. So now we have a sound that's just an extrapolation of this sound, because we have some more strings and we let them ring. Right? So in that sound, right? There you go. That's that sound. But you have these open strings in the middle, which give you what you call dissonant colors, right? The flat 9 and the flatted 5th. So I found this chord. I was like, that's a nice, juicy, ringing kind of chord. And I used this sound in actually a couple of tunes, and kind of try to find the A natural in there, because it's another open string, and getting that kind of sound, right? Right? Then kind of hearing the F2. You're building on top of sounds, the basic sound being a major sound, the dominant sound, then you have the sharp 9. So we're adding other flavors to that, right? Basically, other ingredients to this little salad of sounds. But still keeping the context of it being a dominant chord, right? That's the sound. That's the basic idea. Now, I use this sound in some tunes, and then I was realizing that I'm still in finding a place for this song. For this chord in some songs. Excuse me. I still would just kind of play the chord, and maybe up or back, and I realized that I'm still not training my ear to hear all the nuances in the possibilities of this. Like, the guitar makes you play a certain way. We strum the strings as they go down. That gives me 1, 3, flat 9, flat 5, 7. But if I was to play the notes in this chord as they would be ascending, that's the next one, right? Right? That's the notes in order of from bottom to top, as you would see on a keyboard, right? So just to hear, that changes it too. Guitar makes us hear things in a certain way just because of the way things fall. So I'm trying to hear it in a certain order. Now I just kind of scramble these notes and just, what if I skip a string? And then maybe hit the root, and then grab 2 notes at a time. See what happens. There's so many ways that we can kind of open up a sound that we don't stop and actually do this just because the sound might be interesting enough in and of itself, but we can still look deeper and find another way to organize these notes. It's as simple as that. And just trying to, what else can this sound be? My brain tells me it's one thing. My fingers know to go to press these, and the rest of the strings are open. But am I really tasting the chord? Am I really tasting the sound? Is there more nuances that I can be aware of just based on tasting past the obvious thing of it's spicy or it's sweet or it's this or that. So kind of trying every possible combination of double stops, of triple stops, of one, and to open this sound up in my ear as a kind of as a chord or as a broken chord, right? And these are kind of random things. This is just me kind of putting things in the stew and evaluating, well, what does that do to the flavor of it? What is that? How much is too much of this? How loud do I hit this note? Everything changes the effect, the ultimate effect. So what I'm looking for is how many things am I going past because I'm concerned with my brain telling me what to do and then my fingers carrying out some action. What is my ear missing when I just investigate a sound? And as I do this, now I can open it up around just what the notes are in all these open strings, but finding what else is in it. That would just be the two triads that are kind of implied in this chord, because there's a G triad. You can also add A natural, or you could add the 13th. It's kind of a dissonant sound, but it's all just what happens when I change it slightly. So that's what I'm looking for when I find something. How many things can it be? And I think a big part of just taking time and letting your ear hear things is a training for when you improvise and going off on one idea, trusting yourself to play one thing and stick with it, and trust that you will find something if you stay on that very track, as opposed to saying, oh, another scale, another sound, another thing to explore. Of course, if you're playing a song, the sound changes, you have to go with that. But how can I keep the same melodic idea, the same train of thought, even as the chords change? This is kind of a bit of a balancing act, or a dance that we have to do when we play through chords. And of course, an easier way is to just remember what the scale is and change scales. But as I say, the pitfall of that is sounding like you're playing scales. Even within the sound of a scale, let's take this scale. What is the scale? It's the things that connect. We can go back to this voicing. It's the things that connect the notes in the chord. Right? What are the notes in between those three notes? In this scale, that's what I'm saying. It would be, right? That's the whole sound. So the scale is the chord if you're thinking about how do I connect the notes in this particular voicing. And up here, you're just kind of it's all, and as I'm trying to scramble the notes of the sound, it's the same way I'm trying to open up the sound of this this particular voicing. I'm trying to find things. That's the interval of a seventh, sixth. Try find different. That's fourths. These are just ways to try to open up the sound of a chord. I have a theory about it because people ask about, like, of course, the history of jazz music, or music in general, is made of great personalities and these great individuals, iconic, at the best, and at least like somewhat eccentric people that are individuals that have their own musical persona, their own style, something that's identifiable about them. And of course, everyone has their own journey towards this, but I have a theory that in relation to jazz education, which is so information-based and so much about we have to learn this, we have to learn these hexatonic scales, we have to learn this, how to rhythmically displace this, and groupings of 5/4, and this and that, all these various things, and everyone seems to be studying the same stuff. So in the context of that, when someone comes out and says, well, how do I be myself? One thing that's counterintuitive is to not study the same stuff that everybody else studies. Now, that's not an endorsement for not studying. You have to study, and you have to work on things. And as I say, it's like, to me, every day about playing an instrument or playing music is about finding something new, as well as honing stuff that you already have under your fingers. Everyone's trying to study this same body of information and hoping to come out as, you know, a completely unique entity. And I think there's other ways to get towards what makes somebody themselves. In other words, to say their idiosyncrasies. And one thing that I don't see people really studying is how to interpret a melody. Because a melody is something that the notes are fixed. You can't just, you know, invent everything on the spot. It has to do with using your sound and using ways of phrasing the melody, putting the notes in the order that's already been determined, but trying to add some of your own personality to it. This is kind of a difficult thing to do. So I think one way towards finding your own sound is seeing how you interpret melodies, even very common and well-known melodies. What can you bring out of this tune that is you? So you discover what you are when you are faced with a piece of music, even a simple piece of music, and say, how do I process this? How do I feel about it? So that's the thing that's unique to everyone, is how they feel about something. And if we can manipulate the instrument to express how we feel about a piece of music, we're on our way to having some kind of our own sound, our own individuality with that. So I think it seems counterintuitive to do that, but I think that's a way that you can find some of these quirks that you might have is by putting in context the study of the things that make you, okay, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is the hip stuff, this is basic stuff. And not really, you know, everything is basic stuff. And whatever you put on that is something extrapolated from a basic thing. So the idea of you know, first of all, finding your sound is about what do you want your sound to be? What are you looking for? So just having an opinion and a sense of aesthetics about what it is you like is the first step to that. But I think there are basic things that help you, because that's too big a question where you end up chasing your own tail around in a circle, or just kind of gazing at your own navel in a way, like, what am I here for? That's a little too deep. Just take a tune and find a way that you feel about it, and you know, that's a step towards that direction, of which that's an endless road of how to become more yourself and less about what you learn and steal, and you know, finding a way to have the courage to play stuff that you think of that you feel strongly about, as opposed to the way you feel this is how I should play, you know. So improvisation gives you an incredible freedom, you know. And to me, it's like interpreting a melody is just less freedom, but gives you enough freedom, but also gives you something strict, a discipline, basically the notes being already laid out for you to play, gives you something to work within. One thing that's connected to interpreting a melody, but also something that questions people had about playing solo guitar, playing kind of rubato, and in time, in terms of playing solo. To me, a big thing about playing a song also is just how you can make the melody feel not in tempo. Of course, if you take a song like, the first thing is to learn it in tempo and see what it really is, the note values. So it's like, that's pretty straight, that's pretty square there. You would never really phrase it that on the beat. So part of the thing is, how would I play that in time? Right? Without changing the notes, just changing some of the placements of the notes. The other thing is to think about a phrase like that, and how can you render that phrase in rubato? Not in a constant pulse, but how can you keep the integrity of the phrase, not lose the thread of it, but just pause and stop at your leisure. So sometimes rubato can mean faster. Then you just buy some time and wait. All right? Now, in that time that you're waiting to play the next phrase is when you can answer yourself with some kind of counter thing and some kind of, we'll call it, minimal orchestration. So what you're doing is you're playing the melody, and then as you wait to play the next phrase, you can kind of hear some kind of answer that could be some kind of chordal thing. Now that's adding a lot, whereas you have to decide, if you're playing solo, how much to add and when. Maybe that'd be a lot to add in the first 8 bars, but that's exercising your discretion about how dense, how open, how much space do you want to leave. So these are all things you play with, but I think the first thing is really how can you play the melody out of time and just let yourself get to the next phrase when you want, without adding chords. Right? So you just, and these things will come to you about how to fill in that space. But the first thing is to really have different ways and experiment and be free with how you can play the melody and resolve the phrases and control the flow of it. Let's move it on to the bridge. I got ahead of myself. I wanted to play the bridge just with the single notes. Right? So that's moving pretty fast with the bridge if I took a lot of time on the A sections, or vice versa. So experimenting with rubato, meaning you're free to play the phrases when you want, but while you're playing the phrase, try to keep the idea of what is the direction of this phrase. There's not one right way, but through the courage of your convictions, you make people think it's the right way to play it at that very moment, which is all we can really do when we're improvising. But it's just trying to say, how can this go? Can it go this way? How about this way? And doing that without adding a bunch of stuff, because I think a lot of times with solo guitar, people fall into the trap of feeling they have to add a bunch of stuff before they really have a concrete sense or a fluid sense or an open sense of how the melody can be interpreted. And different places that you leave space are going to mean different things that you play. So finding an arrangement is good, but then opening that arrangement up as soon as possible. As soon as it's kind of something that's known and comfortable to you, try to change the rhythm, change the flow of when this moves to this. And of course, another thing about playing solo is what to do when you commit to tempo and find yourself, say now I'm out on the highway and, the speed limit is this, but if you go, 30 miles below the speed limit, that's also dangerous. So the thing is how do you get inside the flow of consistent pulse? And I think playing rubato can help you with phrasing in time, making, feeling like when you go into time, it's a release. It's something that now we're moving steady. So I'll go from the bridge and try to get into where I might be playing time. would be the idea, to just set up the chorus out of time, and then when you go into time, it would be some kind of release, and some kind of release of the tension, so that you can say, okay, now here we're going. Now that's, you might say that that's not exactly the hard part out of the way. The hard part is to keep in time and play music. And doing that by yourself is a balancing act of how you render the melody or the melodic, taking the solo, and also how to comp for yourself without just playing necessarily just a straight block chord solo. Oh, that's fine too. So that's a big question that people had, is about balancing solo ideas with comping. So the hardest thing about that is just to make whatever you play sound complete and sound clear. You don't have to play a lot. You don't have to comp a lot. It's just about how you decide to support your own ideas, which is actually a great thing because it teaches you about both comping and what's necessary with that, and also how to solo with someone comping who might be just playing in the spaces that you leave. Are you leaving them any spaces to play in? In this case, you have to split your head and leave space for yourself and then fill it. So that's the thing. You start to you feel like you're going two directions at once. But the idea of playing, a simple song like this, well, not simple, but straightforward song that stays in the key, basically a cycle of fourths, and then the bridge goes to the relative minor. And just how do you play ideas that are self-sufficient, where the thing becomes about how you answer yourself. One question was about dissecting Monk for solo guitar. What are the challenges of arranging Monk for guitar? What are some of the common riffs and ideas that Monk uses? Well, to me, with Monk, it's just about trying to understand the song. And there's so much incredible logic and, beauty in his music. So what I found was, the thing about Monk is that he, compared to many other piano players, he leaves a lot out. There's not that many chords that have 10 notes or more in them. A lot of times it's really about the sound of the intervals of the notes in the chords. He'll play something like this. And that'll be his ninth chord because he wants those intervals. He wants the seventh, and then he wants a 10th with the ninth from the seventh, right? So it's just 3 notes. Now you're leaving out the third, but what he's trying to do is not have that. He's trying to have this. So I think Monk thought a lot about elimination and about what happens when you take notes out of the chords and kind of distilling the sound of the chords. And I think when you play the guitar, you have to do that. You have to reduce, because you can't play as 10 notes for a chord. Even if a big 6-note chord, you can't play that all the time. So a lot of it is reduction. And a lot of Monk's tunes, I think the harmony is so implied so strongly in the melody and just the way things move that things are effective without playing a lot of notes. Monk has a unique kind of world that he created with those open intervals, with the close intervals, seconds and things like that. Dissonance, the way he used dissonance. It's the contrast of dissonance and the lyricism of his tunes. You know, his melodies are pretty. There's pretty notes. There's pretty things. You know, rich harmonic things, but also you know, things that are open, and really more is implied than is actually stated sometimes. But I just think with Monk, the way he played, leaving a lot of things out, it does apply to the guitar more so than you would think. And it's just about trying to, you know, just like anything, just getting to the whatever you feel the essence of the song might be, besides just analyzing it and what happens. In this case, it's a bar of C major and then a bar of E flat minor to A flat, and that brings you back to 2, right? That's just E flat minor 7. And then he has this thing he plays, which is kind of part of the song. D minor, B flat 7, E flat major. So it gets you out of the key that you started in, C major, right? E flat major, A7, go to the flat 5, and now we're starting a cycle of fourths from A flat. It's a 2-5 to G flat, F7, now right back to E flat minor. It's kind of a deceptive A flat, G, and it lands on the flat 2, which is a big thing that Monk played in the key of C. There's a few tunes that resolve like that. 5, the 1 is in the melody, but the root is the flat 2. So he has the sound, and he used the sound not so much as a Lydian sound. To me, it sounds like he really plays the sharp 4 into 3, right? As opposed to like you might have this. You would have that, but this is the sharp 4, you know, it's a suspension, but what he's doing is suspending you, and after you're done being suspended, you're still suspended until it resolves back into the 1 again. So Monk was always playing with this balance of tension and release, the way he creates tension and the way he releases tension. So a lot about music to learn from Monk's tunes and how they're balanced, how they're structured. So to me, it's just about that. It's about understanding, like again, the information of it. What is it telling you is possible with music? But then also the poetry of Monk, of how those phrases create a song, and just the strength of this descending. And it goes up again and sits right there. It ends up, you know, 3 times down, once up. It's like a, you know, sets you up for the next rhyme. That really ends the highest note so far of the song. And again, I'm trying to, like, before I add stuff, I want to, and this is getting back to my point about playing solo guitar and rubato and in tempo and stuff like that, is to get a sense of how the phrases hang together without a steady pulse, you know. How do you see that balance, you know? So with Monk, a lot of times it's just trying to reduce what he played on the piano, which is already kind of a reduction of what most other piano players would play. So I think Monk's sound and some of the things he embodies in his music really come from the things that you're leaving out, which is, to me as a guitar player, is inspiring, because we have to leave stuff out, as I said. So I want to figure out how to leave stuff out and imply more. How do you get us guitar players, all of us guitar players, away from looking at a fake book and thinking that because the chart says B flat 13, flat 9, you have to play B flat 13, flat 9. So to me, what's in fake books or what's in charts, how we choose to notate chords is important, because there should be some specificity about it. If the melody was the 7th, and the person wanted this voicing, which would be the flat 9 and the 13 and then the 7th above that, that would be, I think, worth writing out to say this is the sound that I want. Because Anything that's specific is good. And Monk was all about that too. Specificity, not even just the notes in a chord, but how he would play the notes in the chord. Monk had technique in the sense that maybe not fast technique, but he had incredible technique. I mean, he did have fast technique, but people thought that, they didn't realize the technique that he had was in the way he brought out the sound of the notes in the chords. How loud is the flat 9? How do you balance it with the other notes? Anyway, it's important to look at why a certain chord is written a certain way and how specific can we get in terms of the intention of what that chord is doing there. One thing I'll say about remembering songs in terms of what the fake book says or what the chart says, I think that's dangerous. I think we have to remember how the song goes in our ear. And someone was once telling me about this incredible musician. They can play everything and they have a photographic memory. And I thought about it later. I'm like, why do you want a photographic memory? I mean, it's good to have a photographic memory for other things like remembering the grocery list or whatever you might need to remember. But for playing music, why would you want to remember a chart, especially if there's mistakes on it? You don't want to remember, have in your mind, I'm looking at this is why I'm playing this. And I think that's what the question is getting at. It's about understanding what the song is, putting the music away as soon as possible, and trying to remember the form like you remember a story or you remember a joke. And you go through the form of the joke or the story and find different ways of adding or subtracting things, hopefully getting closer towards the essence of the meaning of what it is for you, the story, the joke, in this case, the song. But to try to address the question about if the chart says B flat 13, flat 9, is to understand the function of that chord and not just have your hands remember to go there at a certain time, but to understand what is the function of the chord. That's always determining the choices that you make. What's the next chord? What's the chord before that? If, as I say, if it's specific, the melody is the 13, and you want the flat 9 underneath it, or vice versa, then it should be written there. However, when you're playing the song, you can also make the choice to do something else. It's really more about the function of the chord and learning a song as if it's really like just a series of directions. Like it's 2 blocks north, then you take a left, and you go 4 blocks that direction, and then, but that's the whole thing. A song, basically, because it's a chorus, it will bring you back to the beginning. So you're just learning a little route, and then you find ways to change the route slightly based on understanding, well, do I want to go this far out of my way? If I do, I have to be faster to come back around to make sure that I hit this part at the right time. So it's just about understanding, not using your photographic memory to remember a song, but to remember the feeling of how the harmony flows. What are the ups and downs? Ups being tension, downs being resolutions. What's the ebb and flow of the song? And to me, a great way of remembering the chord changes is through the melody, because I think a lot of people separate those, and as guitar players we only comp on a tune and then try to take a solo because somebody else is playing the melody. That's fine in a jam session, but go back and learn the song, understand what the chords mean based on what the melody is dictating the chords to be. The chords are there to support the melody. So to learn the melody, and then I say, next week I'll go back and learn the chords, or now I know the chords, and next week I'll go and learn the melody. It doesn't make sense. You want to learn them both at the same time, and understand the balance and the structure of how one is there for the other. You have to work backwards. How many ways can you get to G minor? 1, 4, 3, 6. Could also be 1 down. Could be right down in half steps. Same idea. Could be 1. Just different ways of saying the same thing. When I'm thinking of a song like this and comping, I'm going to try to pick my places where I want to land. To me, you might have 8 bars or 16 bars or open on one chord, but really it's about how you can create tension from leaving the chord and coming back. So you're building phrases where the F is the key note in 1 and in 5. So you're playing. So just ways of getting outside the 1. If you're right in the middle of the beat, then you're there. If you're in the front of the beat, it leans on something. Back of the beat, you lean backwards. A groove, what it is, it's where you do something so much the repetition that it wears a groove in there. So I think a lot of times when we comp, we're afraid of repetition. We're afraid of doing the same thing over and over again, but it's actually important. Everything about rhythm, and it's just trusting yourself to feel it. And what I found is, like, you can never groove if you're not sure. So when in doubt, don't be in doubt. When in doubt, find this is where I feel it, and play that as strong as possible.